And Pat Courtney here, formerly of the SPHE team. I'd like to congratulate PDST and SPHE on an incredible piece of work for secondary level schools. And I know the Stay Safe program has been updated for primary schools because this is an issue that faces 5th and 6th class kids in primary schools, my work as well. What I really want to talk about very briefly is the issue of legislation. I think this is a no-brainer. If current legislation was working, we wouldn't need to be here today. And, you know, going back and looking at the Post Office Act 1951 and amending, it's not good enough. I think we need cyber legislation, and we need legislation that cover, you know, I think we need to lead like this in Ireland, the way we've done on other issues like the referendum and smoking and all the rest of it. The reason I'm saying that is legislation has a way of filtering down really quickly to the ordinary citizen level and to school level. At the moment, the situation is if somebody in school sees sexting, that has to go to the school principal because they've discovered potential child issue, okay? So there's an onerous responsibility placed on school principals right now, sometimes in the teeth of very bitter opposition from parents who are resisting their efforts to get things back on track. So, I mean, what I'm suggesting is that, you know, that the legislation needs to state very clearly that parents have an essential responsibility in relation to their behaviour around their kids' behaviour, and also that the school has teeth to actually do something about what happens outside the school situation. Okay, at the moment, that's the grey issue.
And can I put that to Finola? Finola or Brian, maybe. Do either of you want to take it? Finola, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, this is the very question we're looking at. What way should the legislation be? It's obviously there's a two-pronged approach. It's not all about legislation. There has to be the educational end, which we've heard about very clearly today. But it is very helpful if the issue as a whole is looked at, and then the legislation, the bits and pieces that exist at the moment, which were put in place for very good reason at the time, are perhaps drawn together so there is as clear as possible a statement of what the law is. Certainly we consider that it is important that at the final point that there be criminalisation, because it is a very serious matter potentially. And that be clearly stated. So one of the questions we asked in our issues paper was whether the harassment offence that we mentioned, which is goes back to a 1997 offence, obviously pre-internet, whether that should include a specific statement that it also covers harassment by cyber means or cyber technology, whatever way it's thought best to phrase it. And we think it should. Now, it already covers it quite clearly because it says harassment by any means, but we certainly consider that it should be put in explicitly. And then the issue, as I mentioned, of indirect harassment, which is probably not covered, though there have been a couple of prosecutions. I think there were pleas to them, so the issue never got litigated. But this is a new type of, well, harassment specifically doesn't cover it because, as I said, it has to be one-to-one. But the nature of the internet and smart technology is that it's published to a very large number of people or a group of peers, which is probably more serious, or to the world at large, and that this needs to be addressed in some form. And then there is the question of whether we have specific offences, such as like the revenge porn offence, or where distribution of intimate images should be made a specific offence, or whether there might be a more general offence, which also caught that, which would be posting something that you intend to do harm and which does harm. Because putting something on the internet, even if you don't do it repeatedly, if you only do it once, it's a bit like harassment, because even though you don't do it persistently, the information persists in a way that it never was able to before. And the thing about the internet is that you lose control of information once it's posted in a way that wasn't the case before.
Have we any idea what sort of time frame we might be talking about? you know, for legislation to come in that teachers will be able to point to straight away?
Well, we don't produce the legislation, we make our recommendations, and we intend to report to government with specific recommendations probably in the first half of this year.
Okay.
We're at quite an advanced stage, but we're undergoing this. We're going to have this further consultation with young people.
Yeah.
So
and they're the government are a little distracted at the moment as well.
They have their general election, or we have our general election. But I suspect, I think that there is a great interest in the issue. Certainly when we asked what we should look at, this was one of the topics that came up repeatedly, not only from the public at large, but also from the government departments and TDs. So I think it will be dealt with. It is the issue, it is an issue of the moment, and I think it will be dealt with soon.
Okay, there's a question here.
Sorry, so my name's Brendan, I'm from cybersmarties.com. Basically, Paul had mentioned that the normalization of going out pictures and, say, preparation for going out and sexting, although this is a fantastic resource for junior cert cycle, would it not be more beneficial to have behavioural change at an earlier age within primary schools, so that by the time they do get to social networks, that they know their responsibility and they're self-aware, and they'd know that sexting, they'd know from an earlier age the dangers of sexting?
Does anyone on the panel want to take that, Brian? Or indeed any of our teachers or principal representatives? Have you any thoughts on that, Danielle?
There is a resource available for primary schools at the minute, produced by webwise, called My Selfie, and that looks at safe sharing and images, and it is more of an age-appropriate resource for 5th and 6th class. And as came up earlier, you know, this is an issue that is starting at a younger and younger age. It is young students in primary school are being affected, and the resource produced by webwise is out there for primary teachers as well.
Very question to the lady here. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Mona Moore, representing the Anti-Bullying Centre at DCU. Perhaps a question to Helen Ryan. I think one of the big dilemmas, which we found from the research as well, is how few parents, in a sense, I suppose, are aware or are looking into their children's sort of cyber activities. And I think it's an area where we need to debate it a lot, because in a sense, and this is where I'd like to hear from Helen, to what extent, you know, are the young people actually comfortable with the thought that the parents, for example, want their passwords, perhaps won't let them have an iPhone unless they know their passwords, and so on and so forth. Because I think if we put a lot of pressure on sort of parents to look into, you know, their children's cyber activities, I'm not quite sure whether that is the way. I mean, my own personal view would be that, of course, part of parenting is to build up that trust, so that essentially, you know, parents and children can have this conversation, which Helen agreed, and that then a child or a young person, once they know they're in difficulties, that it's so easy to go to a parent because they know there's not going to be any punitive sort of repercussions, that they are there to help and to solve and to go to schools. And I think if schools become ever more invitational about the problems, rather than taking a rather defensive approach where, you know, we again would have evidence that it's too readily taken a defense, be invitational so that we can all work together. Because it is a problem, I think, that is going to increase, and it needs to be shared by everybody. But don't be defensive, but I'd love to hear Helen's view on how would she like us to increase in our educational programs that parents become ever more tuned in to their children's cyber activities.
Helen? Yeah.
Yes, well, I suppose in short, they don't, you know, they're not comfortable with discussing matters like that, because
the students aren't, or the parents aren't?
Well, both parties in one sense, but from a student's perspective, you know, it is a skipped generation as such with parents, because the internet is quite a new thing, and, you know, app development, app design, I mentioned there earlier, Snapchat or Instagram. I mean, if the parent or parents were to investigate fully with, you know, their passwords, you know, all their online activity. It's kind of like sitting in on, say, you know, a conversation with your friend. It's that personal. It's
like reading your diary back in our generation.
Basically, it's to that level. So I feel that there should be more of an awareness made. There should be more education out there for parents and teachers. But I feel that it shouldn't be an intrusive matter. But I feel that it is something definitely that should be addressed, but to allow that student or that child the independence too, and that trust, because if they have that trust, then the child is, you know, enabled to speak out and speak with that parent about whatever issue is prevailing them. But if that trust isn't there, you know, the bond is broken as such, and it's hard to get that message out, because as a teenager, you know, you really don't want that spotlight on you. You really don't want that extra attention, and teachers and parents, you know, asking, oh, what's that, what's this, and looking over your shoulder. You really don't want that, because it's that part of your life that it's your personal view and response. So yes, to answer, there should be.
Okay. So, yeah, I think we have to wrap. Just sorry, your final point. Yeah.
We actually have a tacklebullying.ie website, which is for teenagers to use so they can discuss issues amongst themselves. And also CyberSafe Ireland, which are launching today, they have programs for primary schools specifically to help them become more internet safe. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. I think we're out of time. We're out of time, I'm being told. Thank you to Brian Hallisey, to Brian Murray, and to Helen, indeed, and also to Fionnuala. Thank you so much for joining us, and to yourselves for joining us this morning. It is Safer Internet Day. Do tweet about it throughout the day, because it's good to get these kind of things out there and trending and get the message out there, and indeed for parents as well to learn a little bit more about this. There is refreshments. Go out and enjoy, and thank you so much for joining us.